The newest set for Magic the Gathering is almost here, but the entire set has been previewed, and so we can look over all of our cards and see what is the most interesting Pauper Commanders. Pauper Commander is a format played very similarly to Commander, however your deck can only consist of 99 commons, and you have one uncommon creature as your commander. No restriction for legendary status, but the color identity rules still do apply. This dramatically changes what's a viable commander, going from just the most interesting, most powerful effects to ones that have the most support. Since you can only use commons and only cards of their color, you end up with a very narrow pool of cards to pull from for any given commander. So today I'm counting down my top 10 new Pauper Commanders from Duskmourn, House of Horror. Number 10 is Gremlin Tamer. They are a 2-mana, white and blue 2/2 human scout that has Eerie. Eerie is a new mechanic that's exactly the same as Constellation, plus supporting the set mechanic. It says whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, create a 1/1 red gremlin creature token. The wording for this is really just that there's a new mechanic in Duskmourn called rooms that are two-faced enchantments. You unlock the first room by simply playing it, which triggers Eerie, and then you unlock the second room, fully unlocking it, to trigger Eerie again. Despite putting this so low on my list, I think it's pretty decently strong. If you can reliably hit those enchantments, then you're going to be able to make a pretty wide board pretty fast. The main reason why it's so low is because there's just a lot of cards that do a very similar thing. In this set alone, you have other options like Glimmer Seeker and Razorkin Horde Caller to make tokens reliably. Gremlin Tamer, I think, definitely deserves to be on this list. There's just a lot of stuff that's competing for its spot and doing a very similar thing. Number 9, Fear of Burning Alive. This is a 6-mana 4/4 red enchantment creature nightmare. When Fear of Burning Alive enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to opponent, if you have Delirium, which is having 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, Fear of Burning Alive deals that amount of damage to target creature that player controls. This card is coming down really late. 6 mana is a lot, and it's mono red, but it's doing a lot of stuff. First of all, it's just going to enter, be a big body, help you control the board with its enter the battlefield effect. But then if you satisfy Delirium, you're turning all non-combat damage to face to actually help you control the board. As people say, life is a resource, so if you're pinging face, you're not dealing with your opponent's threats. This card's going to let you do both of those things at the same time. Now, Delirium is not the easiest thing to pull off. It does take a lot of deck building, but that's what makes it an interesting deck building choice. The question is going to be, can you safely satisfy this effect and still fill your deck with non-combat damage? And probably, right? Creatures do non-combat damage if they have activated abilities, sorceries do non-combat damage, instants do non-combat damage, an enchantment sitting on the battlefield, you're done. Throw in a couple fetch lands to get a land in the graveyard, it wouldn't be too difficult to see this deck take off pretty easily. Number 8, Inquisitive Glimmer. This is a 2-mana white and blue 2/3 Fox Glimmer enchantment creature. It says enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, unlock costs you pay cost 1 less. Again, this is sort of like Eerie, where it's really just an updated version of an effect we already have. Similar to our first card, this card suffers from just a lot of things doing the same thing it does. Jukai Naturalist is a green-white 2/2 with lifelink that says enchantment spells cost 1 less. And Hero of Iroas is a 2-mana 2/2 that says aura spells you cast cost 1 less. But it also has the upside of heroic whenever you cast a spell that targets Hero of Iroas. Put a +1/+1 counter on Hero of Iroas. I do think Inquisitive Glimmer has a nice space to exist. I don't think we have a better card that is these exact 2 colors, so it does give you some deck building options to actually explore blue enchantments with the Inquisitive Glimmer, and I think it definitely has a home. This kind of effect is never the most interesting. It's very build around, it's very, oh, I'm building an enchantment deck, let's have this as our commander, but it's just kind of a good effect, and that's really been my takeaway from Duskmourn as a whole. Most of the effects are just really solid. They're not the most interesting to build around. They're just good. So I think Inquisitive Glimmer looks really fun, but it's really just build your favorite enchantment deck, and everything's a little bit cheaper. Number 7, Norin Swift Survivalist. Norin is a 1-mana 2/1 red legendary creature human coward. They cannot block, and whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. Okay, so I don't get Norin. I mean, I get how they function, and I get the use case a little bit, I just don't see it personally, but I couldn't not include Norin on this list. People love Norin. And if there's one thing you can say about them is that they are unique. It's an effect that opens up options for people. And that is the most important thing to me from a commander. Norin's effect that allows you to make big swings without worrying that your stuff is going to die is interesting. The thing is that if it does get blocked, and you know you're going to die in that process, you can choose to exile them so that they don't, but you still have to play them again. It's not like it's free to return them from exile. This isn't a normal flicker effect. What you really want is to fill your deck full of attack triggers, stuff that you can swing in, and then if your opponent chooses to block, you exile it and then you recast it. I just think it's going to feel really awkward, and stuff is going to get stuck in exile because you can't afford to play it in your second main phase. Honestly, this is a we'll see situation. I think 7 is the right spot for this card because it's got potential, but I haven't been able to crack this nut yet. Number 6, Fear of Failed Tests, is a 5-mana, 2/7 enchantment creature nightmare. Whenever Fear of Failed Tests deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. I like this card a lot. It's very, very cool. It is expensive. It is 5 mana, and its effect is not really that interesting. This is just card draw is good, and here's a way of getting card draw. That's it. Which is not bad at all. It's a very powerful effect, and there's not really anything competing for this card's spot. There's a few cards that when they take damage, you draw cards, which I think are very, very cool. And there's one other card that has basically this exact same text. It's a 5-mana 2/4 that says whenever Diviner Spirit deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So this is just a pushed version of Diviner Spirit. It's the same mana cost, it has 3 more toughness, and only you get to draw the cards. Being able to push out another spot and just fundamentally power creep it certainly deserves a spot on this list in my opinion. Number 5, Arabella, Abandoned Doll. Arabella is a 2-mana red and white 1/3 legendary artifact creature toy. Whenever Arabella Abandoned Doll attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. One thing I've really liked about this set is how few legendary uncommon creatures there's been. Some sets, the top 10 are just full of legends, and it's kind of hard to get excited about them because you could play them in full-on Commander. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's worth playing them in Pauper because you're not getting that novelty of getting to play a creature that isn't legendary. However, I think Arabella does work better in Pauper Commander in most situations. Because it's rewarding you for being small and wide, that's something that common cards do very well. And in Pauper Commander, you have lower starting life totals, so being able to burn the table out is much more viable. The thing about Arabella is that they do have to risk themselves to get their trigger. This is not the beginning of combat or when you attack, it's when Arabella attacks. So you're probably going to want to include some ways of helping them get in that damage without getting blocked and dying, either with combat tricks or instant speed protection, or with equipment that lets them just not be blocked, like Whisper Silk Cloak. Number 4, Patched Plaything. Patched Plaything is a 3-mana 4/3 artifact creature toy. It's mono white and has double strike. Hearing that is a ridiculous stat line. 3-mana 4/3 with double strike is absurd, so it's gotta have some downside, right? Patched Plaything enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it if you cast it from your hand. So played fairly, this design is to either be blinked to remove the counters, or played from exile by impulse drawing it. But in Pauper Commander, we can just cast this from the command zone and get a 3-mana 4/3 with double strike, no strings attached. Now this definitely isn't one of those cards that falls in the camp of, oh, that's just good, and I agree. But if you like Voltron decks where you just load up one creature with a lot of equipment, just a whole deck that's dedicated to pumping Patched Plaything is going to get in for huge damage really consistently. This card scares me a lot. Like, it's not exciting. It's just really strong. Double strike is just a ridiculous mechanic, honestly. Number 3, Cynical Loner. Cynical Loner is a 2-mana 3/1 black creature human survivor. Cynical Loner can't be blocked by Glimmers. Glimmers are a new type of enchantment creature from this set. They also have the new ability word Survival, which means at the beginning of your second main phase, if this card is tapped, you get an effect. In this case, if they survive, you may search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. I adore over the idea of this card. This is the kind of effect that I go, ooh, I don't know what to do with that yet, but I'm excited to try. It sparks something in my deck builder brain that just wants to try to crack this nut. Entomb effects are really strong. Sometimes putting something into your graveyard is more powerful than putting it into your hand. You're just gonna load up your graveyard with big threats and then resurrect them with things like Dread Return or Summon Undead. There's plenty of common resurrection spells in black. The cool thing about survival is that while the simplest version of triggering it is to attack and not die, hence survival, you just need to tap them any way you see fit. So if you want to run vehicles to tap down Cynical Loner by crewing them, that works. There might be a little bit of friction with most of your cards trying to resurrect creatures and vehicles not counting as creatures while they're in your graveyard, but I think you could have a nice mix of multiple things to really make this card sing. Or you can just find some way to give them unblockable, give them fear, or any number of black unblockable mechanics. All that said, they are a 3/1, so any incidental ping kills them. Standard rule of thumb, invest in protection for your commander in addition to whatever your other game plan is. Number 2, Osseous Stick Twister. Osseous Stick Twister is a 2-mana black 2/2 artifact creature scarecrow with lifelink. They have Delirium, so at the beginning of your end step, if you satisfy the Delirium condition of having 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent may sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. If they don't, Osseous Stick Twister deals damage equal to its power to each opponent who didn't sacrifice a permanent or discard a card this way. This card is super cheap, comes down, and starts controlling the board. You need to satisfy Delirium, so this needs to be a dedicated Graveyard Matters deck, and you need to have ways of filling that bin. But once you do, every turn your opponents have to decide between a card in hand, a non-land permanent on board, so not just creatures, or taking damage. Start loading this up with equipment to get their power even higher, and you're either going to have an open board to swing at, or your opponents are going to be forced to start taking damage. On top of that, the lifelink does trigger from Osseous Stick Twister's effect. This is probably going to be really oppressive and not a lot of fun to play against, but I bet it's going to be a blast to play. Just, understand if some hate shit's thrown your way. And last, number 1, Defiant Survivor. This is a 3-mana green 3/2 human survivor with survival. Whenever you survive combat, manifest Dread. So this is a new spin on the manifest mechanic. Instead of manifesting the top card of your library, when you manifest Dread, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, choose one, put it face down as a manifested creature, and the other into your graveyard. A manifest creature is a face down, colorless 2/2 creature that can be turned face up at any time for its mana cost. At a baseline, Defiant Survivor says, if you can find some way of tapping me down, in my second main phase, I'm going to make you a 2/2 token. That's already pretty good. The thing is, it's not just a 2/2 token. Oftentimes, cards that care about morph, or manifest, or cloak, or disguise, they're a little bit too narrow. They have this commander that either interacts with it, but you don't have enough support in the 99, or they just kind of do their own thing that happens to include that mechanic. Defiant Survivor lets you manifest cards on the top of your deck, and you can run anything that cares about flipping things face up, because your commander is giving you face down things to flip up. You can run anything that cares about being flipped up, because this lets you skip the initial 3 mana to play a face down morph creature or disguise creature. You just need to flip them face up. And you get to pay the cheaper of the 2, either the morph ability or the mana cost when you flip it face up. Either you can use the morph ability, or you can pay the mana cost, because that's how manifest works. Either way, a card with a morph will say, when I am turned face up, not when I'm turned face up using the morph ability. It doesn't matter, you just get that value. Defiant Survivor is so exciting to me. I don't want to ramble too long because it would be very easy for me to just go off about all the cool things you can do with Manifest. So if you want to see like a deck tech, let me know, maybe I'll make one. Oh, there's one thing I did forget to talk about though, survival. In green, there are so many options to trigger survival. In green, there are a ton of these 1-mana mana dorks that have the downside of instead of just tapping for mana, they tap and then tap one of your creatures to make mana. This is absolutely huge for us. It means we can reliably trigger survival while even ramping. And of course, you can have other ways of tapping it down. You could find ways of getting in with damage. Vehicles really aren't a great direction to go if you can help it, because they won't count as creatures for the sake of Manifest. Manifest is not if it's a permanent flip it up for its mana cost, it's if it is a creature. And vehicles aren't creatures until they're crewed. Just something to watch out for. Manifest is one of the coolest mechanics in the game, and it's really not used that much. There's just not enough support, especially at common, to make it worth your time. But having your commander be able to supply you the manifests means you really don't need to do a lot of extra lifting with the rest of your deck. It's really strong and really cool, and there's a lot of synergy points to take advantage of it, and I'm doing that thing. I am rambling. Okay. Defiant Survivor is my #1 pick for Duskmourn, House of Horrors, Pauper Commanders. I'm super excited for the set. Have a great night, and I will see you next time.